Today, we'll be discussing a university prank that ended up becoming a religion. Before we start, let's just define these terms so we're all on the same page. A prank is a practical joke or playful act, sometimes in malice, but most commonly in sport. Religion is the belief in and reverence for a supernatural power or powers, organised into a system of doctrine and practice. Oh, and one more thing. In researching this video, I discovered that this happened not once, but twice. So let me just fix the title. Perfect. The groups we're looking at today are much smaller than the major religions like Christianity, and fall under the banner of magical traditions. Even just calling them a religion is contentious, but they count if you squint. Both the groups are still active in some form, so I'm going to choose my words very carefully, because the last person you want angry at you is a wizard. Something to keep in mind is that magical orders have two histories, a mythological one and a factual one. The mythological one is the founding myth a group has of their creation, and the factual one is what can be independently verified from the hard evidence. For example, Christianity. The myth is that Jesus is the Son of God sent to usher in a new age. The factual side is that Jesus was merely a human cult leader, albeit a very successful one. Both are true, but only one is factual, and it's the factual history we're going to be covering today. Let's go chronologically and start with a group known as the Rosicrucians. Rosicrucianism. You may have heard the name before. It's one of the oldest and most influential magical lineages in Western esotericism. It's still active today, albeit a far cry from its heyday in the 1600s. We'll get into its founding in a moment, but it's no exaggeration to say that there was an explosion of interest when it was founded that would continue on for a long time. And as successor orders were split and founded over the centuries, its influence can be traced into almost every Western magical tradition. Like most magical orders, Rosicrucianism fractured and splintered over the years into various successors. If you're familiar with Western magic, then you'll definitely know the most prominent, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. There's even groups that still claim the original name, with the most active being the ancient mystical order of the Rosicrucians, who say they've got over 200,000 members worldwide. And also, one not a direct successor, Rosicrucianism had a large impact on Freemasonry, arguably the most famous Western esoteric tradition in modern times. So, how did it start? An anonymously written paper called the Fama Fraternitatis, which was about the travels of a mystic known as Father C.R. and his group of followers, called the Fraternity of the Rose Cross, was published in 1614. It detailed his journey of learning across the Middle East and Europe, and the Brotherhood's mission to cure the sick. Interest in the group exploded soon after, with more papers from this mysterious group being published, the Confessio Fraternitatis, and the Chemical Wedding of the Christian Rosencreutz. People all across Europe wanted to know more about this mysterious brotherhood. Soon enough, there was an explosion of books claiming to be written by the secret fraternity, including elaborate details about their philosophy, magic, and organisation. A great many people wanted to join the Rosicrucian order after their papers were published, but there was one small problem. The original paper, the Fama Fraternitatis, was a joke. It was written by members of the University of Wittenberg in Germany around 1610, and while originally written for private consumption, it was eventually published publicly in 1614. It caught the public's attention, and because it wasn't actually written by a real secret organisation, people looking to make a quick buck capitalised on this and filled the gap with material taken from elsewhere, or even just made it up. Lots of these Rosicrucian orders appeared all over Europe, and some were founded by people from existing traditions who brought with them already robust teachings with a new coat of paint. Over time, the worst material got filtered out, and they were left with functioning magic systems that were unique enough to be called their own tradition. The fact that you can still find active groups using the Rosicrucian name shows that there must have been significant value in the teachings. Of course, most still claim they had gotten their teaching from the original non-existent secret society mentioned in the founding articles. And to be honest, this isn't uncommon in the magic world. As we're about to find out, founding a group based on a joke isn't entirely uncommon either. Next up are Druids. Since the historical Druids, the ones during Roman times, didn't really write anything down, we don't really know what they did. Everyone today thinks that Stonehenge was built by the Druids, but even that was around long before they were. The only information we have about them is from the Romans, who hated them, so it's hard to trust what they say. Druids as a magical group started around the 1700s and continue today, but they couldn't get their practice from the original ones. Their rituals and writings aren't entirely made up. They're often from other magical traditions and taken very seriously. Of course, we're not here to talk about all Druid groups. We're not going to talk about one specific group in particular, the Reformed Druids of North America. The Reformed Druids of North America, or the RDNA for short, are a remarkably tongue-in-cheek group of people who respect nature and view it as vital in their quest for spiritual understanding. The RDNA are hard to call a religion. None of their texts are official, there's no central organisation, participation in rituals isn't mandatory, and they only have 2 tenets which have undergone multiple rewrites over the years. Their core tenets were originally written as follows. The North American Reformed Druids believe that one of the many ways in which the object of man's search for religious truth can be found is through nature, the Earth Mother. The North American Reformed Druids believe that nature, being one of the primary concerns in man's life and struggle, and being one of the objects of creation, is important to man's spiritual quests. It was eventually rewritten to be a little more poetic. The object of the search for religious truth, which is universal and a never-ending search, may be found through the Earth Mother, which is nature. But this is one way, yea, one way among many. And great is the importance, which is of a spiritual importance of nature, which is the Earth Mother. For it is one of the objects of creation, and with it do we live, yea, even as we do struggle through life, are we come face to face with it. But, because most people can't remember them, they're often summarised as thus. Nature is good, and likewise, nature is good. Perhaps it's less surprising than with the Rosicrucians that an order like the RDNA started as a joke, but there's a bit more to it than that. To understand, let's take a look at how it all happened. So in the 1960s in Carleton College, Minnesota, they had a requirement that every student had to attend a regular worship session for their religion. Although the college was founded by a religious group, at the time it was non-denominational, so some students thought it was pretty annoying that they still had to attend worship service. To protest, they created their own religious group. You guessed it, the Reformed Druids of North America. Not only was the RDNA not created based on existing Druid groups from the time, but none of the founding members even knew anything about Druids. It's the reason they adopted the name Reformed, so they didn't need to know anything. They had created rituals out of thin air, usually involving alcohol. They were college students after all. Due in no small part to the RDNA, the college abolished the rule enforcing religious services on all students about a year later. By that time, however, the group had actually taken a place in the spiritual lives of the members, and they decided to continue the practice. In other words, their magic worked. To paraphrase John Michael Greer, a later 3rd grade member of the RDNA, they called out in their rituals, and something answered. So magic just works that way. You can just make something up and it works? Well, yeah. Magic works like everything else. People start poking around in the dark, and then when they find something, they build on it. If you could trace every magical tradition back to its source, you'd find they all started in a similar way. Someone tries something, it works, and they keep doing it. Usually when forming a new group, people will base it on work from a previous group, like what happened with some of the Rosicrucians, and you can draw a family tree of magical traditions back a very long time. While some groups like the Druids have an obvious launching off point, most groups can legitimately trace their lineage back to times you need an archaeologist to study. Many groups claim to have secrets passed down from the ancient Egyptians, and surprisingly it's not too far from the truth. A more complex history will have to wait for another video, but the West inherited Egyptian magic via Greece and Rome, who inspired that great cultural flourishing of the Renaissance. Alongside the cultural explosion during the Renaissance, there was also a magical one. Magical texts from Rome, Greece, and the Middle East, who also had massive influence from the ancient Egyptians, were studied and developed into new methods. The influence of the Renaissance on European culture cannot be understated, and likewise, it was a launching point for basically every Western magic tradition for a very long time afterwards. Later on, we did get some new ideas springing up, as we covered today, but it's incredibly rare for anything to be created in a vacuum, like the Reformed Druids effectively were. So what do we get from this? Well, people don't do things for no reason. If something's taking your time and energy and not giving enough back, then you stop. People get something from magic and religion, to the point where it can materialize spontaneously from a joke. Did a bunch of open-minded university students in the 60s plan to found a new religion when they started the RDNA? Not at all. They were just doing what students have always done, and they just wanted to stick it to the man. Well, is it a scam then? Well, I don't know any scam that outright refuses to let their members give them money to the point it's detrimental. They get something from that experience. Something so meaningful that almost 60 years later the group is still active, and has even spawned successor groups. The most interesting part is that it gives us a glimpse into how magical traditions start, and how belief can find people even when they're least expected. I find these events in the history of magic fascinating, because it not only tells us a lot about magic, it tells us a lot about people too. I hope you enjoyed learning about these groups as much as I did, and thank you very much for watching. So this is the second series started on this channel, and as you can tell, this one's going to be more magic focused. All the references that I use today will be found in the description, and since these ones are a bit more academic in nature, you can expect references to be in all of these future videos too. Yeah, so let me know what you think. If you enjoyed it, if you hated it, please leave a comment below. And if you really liked it, then make sure to subscribe, because more of these videos will be coming soon. Up next will most likely be another video about Grimm's fairy tales. All right, thank you very much for watching today. My name is Morley Duke, and I've been your host today, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks.